Welcome to Chronicles of Arcanis. Once again, we are going to explore my favorite setting by Paradigm Concepts Incorporated, the Shattered Empires. Arcanis, the World of Shattered Empires, was first introduced to the world back at the beginning of the century. There we go with the Codex Arcanus. Codex Arcanus really set a standard moving forward. It was the first setting book that came out where there was like no crunch. I mean, there's a little bit of stuff here and there, but for the most part, it is an in-depth explanation of the setting, and it is told from each chapter the viewpoint of a citizen of that country or territory that's being discussed, which led for all kinds of interesting things in the living campaign because nobody really knew what the truth was. Everybody had a different story, a different interpretation. You would listen and you would look at, this is what they say is the background in Millendeer, and then there's this province over here in Coriani, Salantis, and they say something different, yet they're talking about the same thing. And it just layers upon layers upon layers. And the word that I liked to use in the very beginning was verisimilitude. That for me, it felt more organically grown and natural history than anything else. Definitely more than Greyhawk or Forgotten Realms, which, now decades and decades and decades later, we've discovered, oh no, actually there's all this layer and development, but you weren't privy to that. Paradigm Concepts have really made an effort to make you privy to the story, and through the game, you get to explore and discover the truth. So, part of that discovery is discovering Arcanus itself. So, today, Bill Howell is joining me. Bill started playing back in the first story arc. And so, as we are leading up to Origins, and this is going to be my first Origins back in, oh wow, Origins almost 2 decades now. I'm really excited to relive the stories of that first exciting, really like 5 years, and get that viewpoint of the people who helped make Arcanus and built that foundation that allows it to exist today. So, without much further ado, Bill, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us how you discovered Arcanus?
Well, I'm Bill Howell. These days, I'm semi-retired, living up in Alaska. But in the heyday, which that we're talking, the earlier 2000s, I was still on active duty in the Navy, and mid 2001, I had just come back to the States after 3 years stationed abroad. D&D 3.0 was relatively new and only been out about a year, I want to say, something like that. Um, and the whole living campaign were firing up, as you mentioned, Living Greyhawk, Living Force,
Yeah,
Living Path.
Living Jungle.
Yeah, there was a plethora of them.
It was.
And I found the concept very appealing. This idea that you could go to conventions all over the country, and you would get different. For Greyhawk, you got different regions and things like that. Arcanus obviously was all in one region. So I think the first one I started playing was Living Greyhawk,
Hmm.
but very shortly thereafter, I heard about this. Hey, there's this other campaign out there, this Arcanus, and I was like, what's that about? So I picked up the Codex, and as you said, it was really a revelation to read it and recognize a really well developed, well, like you say, realistic kind of take on things. I can still remember reading in the early part of the Codex where it says alignment has nothing to do with the gods, right? The gods don't have alignment. You can be a lawful good worshiper of the god of death,
Hmm.
this kind of idea. And I was like, well, that is very different compared to like Living Greyhawk, which is just sort of the standard fantasy. There's good guys, there's bad guys. you're going to be one of the good guys or
It's
neutral.
very
You
standard
can't be,
Western European tropes as well.
yeah, very much, very, very classic in that sense that this was the medieval fantasy. Whereas obviously for the very first thing that you just take a look at uh, Arcanus, you can see, well, wow, Henry is looking at a lot of other ideas here. You've got the Coriani that are kind of the analog to the Romans, but there's the Milandir that are kind of the analog to the Middle-aged knights, and then there's these very strange cultures like the Canseri, which and all these different things, and you could tell there was like a huge backstory behind it, where they're talking about thousands of years ago, the Gods' War and the Elori and the snake people. I can never say their name right, Sethagorians or something.
Gregorian.
Yeah, whatever. Snake Man. So you look at all this and you're like, wow, there's a lot of stuff going on here. And so I decided to give it a try. I had a local group that ran different things, and went, and somebody's like, yeah, I'll run Arcanus for the group. So started, I can still remember the first module and thinking, this is not this what I'm used to with Greyhawk. This is very much shades of gray in this, even more so than Greyhawk, which is supposed to be shades of gray. At least that was supposedly the original idea that I'm
Well, what
told.
made you feel that way? What was it about
The
that?
way
So
the
was it
characters,
the one
it
with the wine drinker, or
yeah,
the dwarven wine drinker?
yeah, you had those. You had I can still remember, it was actually one that came on that whole initial arc where you had the boy that you were trying
Hmm.
to rescue.
Yep.
And initially you think, well, this is just, we're rescuing this boy because this is the right thing to do. And and then by the time you get to the end of the arc, you realize this guy he's a weapon, right? He's been weaponized to attack. I think it's to shake the pillars of heaven is like the
Hmm.
final one,
Hmm.
the two-parter there. And you realize that, this kid is never going to be what you thought you were accomplishing in the initial story, right? I'm going to save this kid and he's going to go off and he's going to have a wonderful life. No, that's never going to happen. Whatever you do, and it just becomes a question of, okay,
Just so you know, this, don't worry
how is
about
he?
spoilers. This is the first year story arc spoil away, man. This is, if they don't know,
I
that's
would
on.
hope it, if you haven't read it, if you don't, if you're 25 years or 20 some odd years behind, here we go. I
Yeah,
think it is still available. You
absolutely it
want to
is.
drive through RPGA and download those whole first 2 years, I think, are available,
Yep.
because it's the Year of Ill Harvest, and then there's
I don't remember the second one off the top of my
I
head.
can't remember what it is called, but they're there. And I encourage anybody who's interested in playing Arcanus currently, if you haven't gone back and looked at those, you really should, because in many ways they set the tone of the game.
And the
And
foundation for how easily what you may believe is one thing is not.
not.
It
And the
really.
other thing I really liked that was there from the very beginning is this whole idea of secret societies,
Hmm.
secret orders, where the different players might or might not have their own agendas
Now,
that
did you,
they
was
are
that in the other living campaigns? Because that's one of the things I really want to stress to the listeners, the people who haven't experienced Arcanus yet,
yeah,
is that many of the things we see today in convention, in organized play, it started with Living Arcanus. I don't
yeah.
remember any other living campaign, having something like secret societies where
There
you could
were
receive orders that were contrary to the goals of the party.
the most that I can ever think of seeing in Living Greyhawk would be, you might belong to some meta organization,
Mhm.
right? Which might have some goals, which you could then, as a character, say, okay, because I'm a knight of the watch or whatever, I'm going to pursue this.
Mhm.
There was nothing like written in the module to
Mhm.
give you specific directions the way that there would be with the Arcana secret societies.
So there wasn't like fame and infamy. You couldn't become a famous person within your secret society.
No, and you didn't have again, it wasn't true player versus player.
Mm-hmm.
but there was an element of PvP, right? If one person is pursuing one secret society and another person is in a different secret society and they have conflicting orders, then there becomes this how are this thing going to work out? With people are working at cross purposes to each other.
Instead of
It
PvP, I would refer to it as MVM, Machiavelli versus Machiavelli.
Yeah, you want to say that it's manipulation versus manipulation, right? Because everybody is trying. Sometimes they didn't necessarily conflict,
Mm-hmm.
but oftentimes they did. And if you happen to have a party that had members from, the Mourners
Mourners in
versus the
silence.
Oxy, or the Azure Way versus the Emerald Society, and they would be trying to maneuver. You couldn't actually just come out and attack the other player, but you tried to maneuver the situation so what you were trying to do came out. So that fostered an element of I don't know, wouldn't say paranoia is the right word, but suspicion. To me, when you played an Arcanus game,
Why did
you
he
were
do that?
always on your toes, right? You were
Yep.
looking, you were always wondering, and I didn't have that in Living Greyhawk, right? You live in Greyhawk, you got your six people or whatever, and you're all on the side of good, pretty much. You're all trying to drive the giants out of Jeff or whatever. You may have disagreements about tactics or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
but your goals were always pretty much in alignment. That
Mm-hmm.
wasn't the case in Arcanus. Different people had different things. I kind of just stumbled in with my first character I was going to, just created to play. Um, Naturally created a Val because what
Okay.
the hell, it's a chance to play psionics again. That was another great thing about Arcanus is they use psionics rules, which a lot of the living stuff didn't.
Mm-hmm. Let's
Decided he
talk a bit about Val. What do you mean that? So that's a
Well,
little
that's the
jargon
race,
alert.
right? There's one of the races in Arcanus that is descended from the Valinor, which are these servitors of the gods. So, which also they are a very cool concept because each of them seems to be like some aspect of the gods.
Correct.
So you would have
Correct.
the
Yeah.
honor of Kadic, or
Right.
the wrath of Nier, or the I don't know,
All those every so that's where they were able to eliminate the alignment aspect of the pantheon, that instead of having alignment and then everything fell into this very narrow strict orthodoxy, that every deity a has multiple many aspects, right? So
right.
I've already talked about Neroth and Belisarda, gods, both gods of death, one of the spirit, one of the mind and the body. Initially, my favorite, the one that I was absolutely fascinated with, was Larissa, because
That's the one that caught my eye too.
she had gone from this very
Chaste goddess of
very
prophecy.
orthodox, controlled, focused on structure and foreseeing,
Mhm.
to madness, and
Right.
to deal with the madness, this dive into, self indulgence to overwhelm whatever that
Hedonistic.
horrid vision was. And that, man, I was like, oh, I'm in. I bought in. This
Yeah.
is this.
So I created a Val Sheen as my first character because each of these different families are descended from different Valinor of the different gods. So they have different characteristics and things like that. And they have the capability alone among the races to become psionically awakened so that they could then use psionic powers. Um, and I didn't initially, like all great characters, I didn't initially plan it all out.
Mm-hmm.
It just kind of evolved. But I started him out. I was like, okay, he's going to be one of Val. He'll be a Val Sheem. He'll be from Corian. Um, um, and over the first few episodes, I realized that I was going to have fun with him because I was going to play him as a Coriani loyalist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? He believed in the Empire. He
Mm-hmm.
believed in Calcestus, the
Mm-hmm.
Emperor. One of the first ones I did was the Carnival of Swords, where you
Yep.
could get the Armalus of Vigilance, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You were like one of the Emperor's boys.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, man, that's how I'm going to play this guy. I gave him the Legionnaire feat,
Mm-hmm.
He had been a legionary, and I was like, okay, he's a Val, but he was a legionary, so he's probably a younger son of a family that, lost a lot of their money or whatever. So he had to join the Legion. So he goes and he joins the Singers of Sweet Savona. So he's got his
Mm-hmm.
legionary tattoos. And then he gets out. Again, it's easy if you're military to think of this way and say,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
get out. And now he decides I'm going to get awakened and I'm going to use my mind instead of my sword
Mm-hmm.
arm, you know. But he was a man, he was a emperor guy. He believed. And later on, when Cal Cestus starts looking like he's going over to the dark side and everything, and a lot of players are like, oh no, I can't give, I'm going to give up my armless of vigilance because I can't support this.
Yep.
My guy, he was like, that the emperor, man,
Yep.
the emperor, what he says, that is it. We are going to follow, So he was constantly, I'd be doing we'd be doing some, you'd get done with some adventure, and I'd be like, okay, here's my report.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
The
yeah, yeah. I
DM,
take
okay, here's
very
my
extensive
report
notes.
that's going to the emperor about all what happened here. I can remember this later one. I do not remember the name of it, where it's about a girl who's trying a Coriani who's trying to avoid an arranged marriage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and all the other players are talking to her about, oh, in character, you should follow your heart. What's important. And my guy's like, it's your duty. You're a Coriani. You need to do what
Mm-hmm.
what your family says. That's the way we work. That's what it's all about,
Yep.
kind of a
Your
thing. So
father, the patrician, has said,
yeah, yeah. This is the deal. The emperor needs you. This marriage is important for the stability of the empire or something. I can't
mm-hmm.
remember what the
Yeah,
exact
sure.
circumstances were, but it was I got a lot of flack from a lot of players in character,
Mm-hmm.
that why are you supporting this madman Cal Cestus? And of course the final thing at the end is when we get to the final big blowdown,
Mm-hmm.
Cal Cestus is on the good team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Turns out he's been betrayed, he's been replaced.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So at the end, I could see. I said, like, see, I told you. He was on to the good team all along. It
Yep.
wasn't his fault that he was deceived and
Right.
that then they replaced him, type
Yeah.
of thing. So
It was.
I always figured when things were all finished, my guy went back to Savona
Mm-hmm.
and became a senator and had 2 or 3 kids.
There you go. Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
you
as
know,
a fellow squid, well, you're a bubblehead, but I'm a squid.
Mhm.
And to me, I looked at Savona as like the greatest port call, Liberty
Yeah.
port ever. And
Oh, absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
just how I thought about it, like, well, I spent some time in Alongapo back in the day
I was
before
going
we
to say,
left.
it's
Yeah.
like the PI. So,
But my first character, this is one of the things I liked about it. So you're a Val, right? And the Vals are considered, not royalty all, but they're all considered to be of a higher class. And one of
right.
the player classes that they made was the patrician. And so I played a human patrician. My
Hmm.
back was Nicodemus Argentum, and my backstory was his family had been risen to patrician because they were the silversmiths that
Hmm.
supplied the
Hmm.
silverware to the emperor, blah blah blah, whatever. And I was the same way. I staunch. I mean, my family is tied to the empire. I was a member of the Azure Way. I was absolutely
Yeah.
dedicated to
Yeah. My
keeping
guy was
the
Azure Way also. It was like,
yeah.
that's what he believes. And in fact, my guy had one level of patrician.
See, all right,
The
so
rest
that's
was
what
all
mine.
the rest was all scion, but he had a level of patrician. And people took me to task about that because they said, you're wasting your time.
No, it's
No, no, no. That's what this guy is about. He's got to have a level of patrician.
yep.
I think it was his first level,
Bingo.
right?
Yeah, you had to take it at first
Started,
level. And
yeah,
I
he
did
had to
the
get his
same
first
thing
level.
because
So yeah,
mine was, oddly enough, as another veteran, was I'm going to take the Legionnaire feat and I'm be a patrician so I can get a sidearm because flintlocks could only be,
hmm
you
hmm
had to be a patrician or a Val or a Val or from out there. So
I
yeah,
don't think I
and then
ever
after that I
fired
took
my
fighter. I took one level of patrician and everything was fighter after that
yeah.
just because.
I don't think I ever fired my flintlock in the game. Maybe once. in
I
all those
never fired
movies.
it effectively.
Well, yeah, my guy just wore it, right, as a symbol, but he was much more effective
Yeah,
with his psionic powers.
yeah,
So
no,
he always was always wearing his flintlock again to as a symbol of your class and everything
mhm,
like that. So yeah, no, I was that's what I liked about. Again, you're talking about what made Arcana special
mhm.
is that you could get into these um, characters that were not your typical
Optimized.
optimized guys, and also that their motivations, again, they were not all goody two shoes, knights, errant, you know, whatever you want to describe it as your typical fantasy hero.
Mhm,
They were people you could build with very rounded characters that had that had flaws, that had blind spots, whatever how you want to describe it. There's
mhm.
like, no, they're going to be loyal, but they're not loyal to some god or something like that, like a
Mhm.
paladin or things like that. They're
Right,
like,
right, right. Well,
you know,
no, there are no paladins, right? We
there
were
are no
just talking
paladins, right?
about that recently, that the holy champions, we just
You got
get rid
holy
of
champion,
paladins.
there's no paladins.
No such
Um,
thing as lawful
and
good paladins who have to always do the right thing.
right, and there's no country that you could point at and go, oh yeah, those are the perfect people, right?
Mhm.
Those are the really good guys. That's you know,
Well,
because
interesting. I mean,
everybody was
in the beginning of the campaign, though, that was Millendeer,
that
right?
was Mill and Deer until you dug a little deeper into it.
And then right.
Guys
So yeah, yeah.
changed.
Well,
Yeah.
absolutely. I I'm primarily a convention game master. Um and I tried to get to a number of the big events as possible before I took a break in 2010. And that's what a lot of this is about, is my run up to, I'm coming back, baby. I'm going back to Origins. I'm going to start running tables again. I'm going to create more Arcaniacs. I like doing intro tables. I like doing low level tables because it's really easy to just so much easier for me to ad lib at this point, not knowing the rule set as well as I used to know third edition. So,
That was
uh,
another thing I want to say a quick word is
yeah,
there's
yeah.
a big difference between playing Arcanus in 3.5 and playing Arcanus in fifth edition.
Well, we'll get to that because I have
Okay.
questions. Yeah,
3.5 was deadly
yeah, 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 yeah. Well, I
compared
think
to
I think it's just the general rule set and the algorithms within the engines, the game engines. But what I
right.
loved about that, so we're talking about Mill and Deer, right? That was supposed to be this paragon of virtue, and in the first story arc, um, they had so one of the things that made Arcanus a huge draw at larger conventions were the battle interactives. And as other people have mentioned, they was eventually called the Arcanus effect, where they just knew at Origins and Gen Con not to schedule a lot of stuff whenever we had our battle interactive blocked out. One year we did a LARP, and I believe that was at Gen Con. And I played an NPC. And the reason there is a homeland ish for the gnomes in Millendeer, because that was my
Mm.
NPC's goal. And oh yeah, man, you think Millendeer is this land of righteousness and knights and orders of valor. Try being a gnome looking for a place to live in Millendeer.
Yeah.
All of a
Because
sudden,
that does exist in Arcanus. There's nobody who's pure as the driven snow. Talking about battle interactives, I can remember the first one I did, which was the
mhm.
Battle of Samar,
All right, yeah.
which was a fantastic battle interactive. And I can remember a couple of really cool things about it. One was almost getting killed by making the mistake of mistaking Black Talon Saracen for enemy Saracen. And
Oops.
yeah, the snake guys.
Yeah,
We're
lizard
the
scales,
snake guys, and
claws,
all of a
shoot.
sudden, this bunch of snake guys show up, and I'm like, snake guys, and they're like, no, they're good snake guys. They damn near kill me. Um, But then another one was, I had a friend at the time who was into Living Greyhawk and everything, and he had also come and he was playing the Battle Interactive. He was not as familiar with Arcanis as me. His name was, I can't remember his last name. First name was Harry. And he was playing an Allori rogue like that. So we were in the situation in the Battle Interactive in one of the rounds or site parts of it where we're retreating, a bunch of Saracen are attacking, we're like covering civilians getting away, and there's some shining patrol guys there
Mm-hmm.
who are firing their flintlocks and covering us, and then they run out of blast powder. So they we're standing there and they say, keep covering the civilians, get the civilians out, we'll cover you.
Fixed
And they
bayonets.
hand me and they hand Harry a flintlock. They're flintlocks,
Mm-hmm.
and they draw their short swords and they charge the Saracen, right? And they all get massacred, right? So we get away, we save the civilians. So I got this flintlock, and I'm like, well, and it says on it, property of the Shining Patrol. It's like, well, I'm gonna go turn this in to the
Mm-hmm.
Shining Patrol. And my buddy is like, I'm gonna keep mine. It's like, man, I do not think you should do that.
You don't
Uh,
really know where you are, buddy. But yeah, an
that's
Alluri
he's
Rogue. I
you
could see an
know this
Alluri
is
Rogue.
these guys died saving us, we shouldn't be. He's like, no, it's what my character would do. I was like, okay. So I go off and I like turn my flintlock in. He tries it and did he regret that,
Mm-hmm.
because when the Shining Patrol caught up with him for stealing their property from their dead guys and just trying to sell it on the black market and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that was perfect classic Arcanus, right?
Yeah.
Actions have
Awesome.
consequences,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Stupidity leads to character creation.
yep, stupidity leads to new characters, and you don't just assume that this everything is here is for me to loot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anything I see or find or whatever, well, the DM must mean it's for me to have.
Right.
No, a lot of stuff you may see it and you may think, oh, that would be cool, but you better not, you better think twice. Think about it,
That's an important
like you
part
would in
of
the real
Arcanus.
world. Would you,
It-
am I going to loot
right.
this corpse, or this grave? Am I going to rob this grave that I found or whatever? I mean, sometimes the answer might be yes, but a lot of times the answer is I ain't touching that with a 10-foot pole
Mm-hmm.
because, you know, I've seen too many people who get the curse
Right.
or
Yep. Yep.
whatever, where it's like, yeah. Whew.
Yeah, I mean, again, one of the things that I really want people who are listening and learning about Arcanus for the first time, and one of the things that I've really focused on is this is a more mature game. This is not you must be out of the murder hobo, loot the bodies
Absolutely.
stage of gaming. This is you can be, as I was, mentioning to someone, you can still be the edge lord. You can this is you can still be edge lordy, grim darky in this campaign if
Mhm.
that's what you want to be, but you're not going to be very successful as a loner. You
No,
know, yeah, that's not going to work because they're that I mean they're deadly. It's a well, I so let's move into that a little bit. So absolutely, third edition, 3.5. Man, did I leave a trail of bodies as a game master.
yeah,
As I've learned fifth edition and then having started to talk to some people, just from reading and learning the game, and it's like, no, they don't want people to die anymore.
no,
It's
it's a
actually really, really, really hard that they really, because I kept hearing these comments of it's now fantasy hero, it's a fantasy hero game, and which I was like, oh, cool, I loved fantasy hero, but they didn't mean that one. They meant, like DC Marvel Comics heroes, and
it's hard. It's much harder to, and not because I have GM'd some in fifth edition, not Arcanus, but some others, and much. It's much easier on the players, in my opinion, because players have much more flexibility in a lot of ways. Let's face it, in 3.5, we didn't have short rests.
Oh yeah, no, no, no,
Right.
no,
We didn't
no.
have spell slots that
No
you
way
could
to
just shift
rebuff.
around, right? No, you got to decide ahead of time, you know. So in a lot of ways, the logistics or the resource management
Mm-hmm.
of 3.5 was much more demanding
Mm-hmm.
than it is in fifth edition. Fifth edition is very flexy,
Mm-hmm.
I'll do this, I'll do that. That doesn't mean it's bad. It just
Right.
means different.
Different.
One of the reasons that I kind of stepped away back after the end of the first cycle was because, here comes fourth edition.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, so I stepped over to Pathfinder and
Okay.
started playing Pathfinder adventures and things like that because again, it was close to 3.5 is what I
Mm-hmm.
knew and everything, and
Did
did
you
the
ever pick up the ARG, the Arcana
I
Special Arcana?
didn't. Somehow I missed it when it came out and
Okay.
everything. I think probably because I had moved up here by then.
Mm-hmm.
And it what I've seen of it looks interesting.
Yep.
Um,
I
I
like it.
haven't,
I've never been able to play it.
yeah. Um, but that was one of the reasons, like when I saw that now Arcanus has also offering fifth edition, I was like, well, I have those rules,
Mm-hmm.
and I can do it. So yeah, it's definitely there's a little from what I have played in fifth edition Arcanus, it's a lot less scary than
In
you
what
don't
way? Yeah, let's
you
talk
don't
about
go
that
to
because
each module thinking, well, is this the one that I die
oh
in?
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Is this the one where he bites it and he's never coming back? Which is another cool thing about Arcanus in that
Mm-hmm.
with the whole Belteen's cauldron idea and everything, it
Yep.
is like, oh yeah, all you just need is enough money and your one finger
Oh,
and you'll get true resurrected. You could come back. It's like, no, well, as long as you do it before dawn the next day,
right. Right.
kind of a thing. There's a lot more
No more throwing a body into a portable hole or
right.
turning them to
Yeah.
stone and breaking off a finger, carrying it with you, turning it back to flesh, and yeah,
Yeah.
no,
Well,
those
I
days
remember
are
the
long.
whole adventure. I can still remember when they killed off Meneses. Have you ever say his name?
Kinesis, yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Meneses killed him off, and guys were like, "Holy God!" He was the great white hope. He was the guy that was going to do this and do that. And then you had the big adventure to bring him back, where you had to go into the where the hell it was, the underworld or
Yeah,
whatever.
where you have to go up to the weird
Yeah, oh, it was,
tower and then into the underworld. Yeah.
and then it turned out that the Gladius of Light that you got way back when that I was still carrying. Oh,
Oh wow, there you go.
that's the key to unlock the door. That was one of that first one. That first, I think it was in the first year.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing where you went off to the realm where the honor of Kadic was trying to hold back the
Mm-hmm.
entropy and everything. That was another one that really made it clear to me that this is a very different uh, whole world, this
Yep.
Arcanus world, very different than any other one out there. It's like, man,
Gladius of Light
this
has
is
come up
heavy.
in the other three as well because this is
It's like,
part of
oh,
what I'm talking about. So you get this because I describe it. I mean, do you remember how it worked?
oh yeah. Well, it had a hilt like a gladius, but the blade was like solid light, right? And it
Except
wouldn't. What's that?
except it wasn't solid.
Right. It so you could put your hand through it and everything like that, but I mean it looked like it was a blade made of solidified light. That's how it appeared. And it didn't hurt anything except undead and entropic creatures, right? It did damage, I can't remember now, but it did even more damage to
Mhm.
entropic creatures. Um, so it was this cool weapon that again, you'd like, I mean, it was kind of specialized. You didn't, I ended up with it, I think, because nobody else at the table wanted it.
There you
And
go.
I was like, that's cool. My guy would want that. I always wondered how you carried it. Did you carry it in a a scabbard like a regular gladius, but the blade is insubstantial, so it's just going to fall off. So
Hmm.
you carry it with a lanyard tied around the handle with it flopping next to you. You put it in your pack. What did you
Put it
do?
in your
But
pocket, wear it
pocket,
around your neck.
but yeah. But anyway, and then so it was one of these things that it's like, oh, that's cool. But and then later on, it turns into this something, there was that other
Crucial.
weird one at this that they had when Leonidas, the Sword of Heaven,
Hmm.
got by the voiceless ones.
Right.
And there was that, it was, I can't, what was it called? Whispers in the Dark. I can't remember, but
Yeah, that was the
it was a
adventure.
very weird one that had almost like no
There was
fighting in it.
no if you pulled your sword in
You
combat, you
were
lost
you
in
were
that one. I keep
were
bringing
killing
up these
yourself.
different examples. That's
Yeah.
the one. Yep.
And then you had different dreams in it, depending on what you were or what you carried. And there was a one I remember that you got because if you had the Gladius of Light,
Hmm.
it was like, don't attack now, this, you carry the weapon, but this is not the time to use it, because you did run into an entropic creature. You didn't have to fight him, but you could, and he'd kick your ass if you did. Um,
Hmm.
and then later on, again, like I said, when you got to the one where you're trying to bring Meneses back from the dead, it turns out, oh, this is the key to unlock
Hmm.
the vault or wherever it was. I
Well,
can
you know
remember.
what Whispers of the Dark was all about, don't you? It was
Well,
trying to
people,
it was trying to solve the flesh ripper problem. Did you ever know anybody with flesh ripper, the cursed sword?
oh yes, that thing.
That's the adventure that I believe that's the adventure that solves the flesh ripper problem.
Right,
Because that was
right.
a be careful. It was a cool idea, but after a
Yeah,
while, people realized, oops, this is a
yeah,
problem.
yeah. There was another one that I can remember with wild ass weapons. I can't remember if this one was certed or not, but there's one where it's the guy, I think he's from Kanseri, and he's trying to kill this general, this retired Koreani general who's like living in retirement somewhere, and and you end up there for some reason, like, the group, and he's doing all this mental stuff where things that people think of appear,
Hmm.
like it's kind of like shore leave Star Trek episode, right? But if you
Hmm.
think of the monster shows up and you have to fight it.
Yep.
And um, and then the trick is to recognize what's going on and convince the general to think about all of his past soldiers. So then all these Koreani legionaries appear and they fight and they're defending and everything like that. But the principal bad guy in that, he had some nasty sword that would like give you disease and all kinds of stuff when he cut you with it, and all
Hmm.
that stuff. And I can still remember the guy, he finally shows up, right, for the big fight at the end, right? Because that was the problem with the generals. He had this wound that wouldn't heal. That's why he retired, because this
Hmm.
guy had wounded him at some point in the past with this nasty sword. So this guy rolls in and he's waving this sword that is super, you could tell just looking at it, right? This thing is like dripping black ichor or something. Everybody's looking at it and going, this is. And at that point, my character had gotten the psionic power. I think it was called retrieval or something like that. So I was like, "Boop," and he blew his will save, and I teleported the sword into my hand and took his sword.
Uh-oh. But it
It
was it
wasn't
cursed?
so tough without it.
Yeah.
So,
All right.
I mean, he had to fail a will save, but he rolled a one or something like that. I was like, what the hell not? I'll give it a shot. And yeah, and it was funnier in hell. The GM was like, "Oh, you've got to be kidding me!" And I was like, "Oh, I got
So
his sword now.
were
So
you
let's see
able to
how tough he
build
is without it."
using were you able to build using the PCI
The player character,
psionics?
to say that again.
Didn't they come out with a third edition or 3.5 psionics book?
Yes, there was a 3.5 psionics book that was yeah, and that was the one they did a rebuild.
Right.
can't remember when, but they did, they did a couple of rebuilds through it when
Hmm.
they went from 3.0 to 3.5 and new stuff came out. And then eventually came out with their player's handbook,
Hmm.
which I got on the shelf back there, but that was had brought out a lot of other good stuff. So, I mean, yeah, I rebuilt the character a couple of times, tinkered around as the new rules came in and things like that. And again, that was to me as, again, you want to compare 3.5 and fifth edition. 3.5 was just so much more complex, just
Hmm.
so many more rules and options and things. You're like, oh my goodness. So this new Codex of the Mind that uh, they've come out with for Psionics and Arcanis in fifth edition, it's a lot simpler.
Okay.
And let's think, we're not doing PowerPoints anymore.
Oh, good.
Used to
Yeah,
be
I'm waiting
everything.
for mine to arrive, so
Okay, yeah.
I haven't looked at it yet.
It makes the psionicists like warlocks.
Okay, I
Pretty
kind of
cool.
had a feeling that was I heard Pedro interviewed once, and that's how he described the structure, the
Yeah,
mechanics was it was
it's very
fitting
warlocky.
into that way.
Yeah, you're going to reset with a short rest. You can cast powers like they're cantrips.
Hmm.
And there's some of them that can be used to um there's some of them that can be used. You can expend your mental focus to have it cast like a spell expression. So yeah, it's pretty similar to, I would say, to like a warlock.
Okay.
Uh,
Well, I'm looking forward to that book showing up. They just did the Kickstarter for the
the
next
Codex
set
Adventure.
of
Yep.
right.
Yep.
So I'm gonna the Codex of Adventure 2, and so I threw on the Codex of the Mind. Um,
Well, that's interesting because what I'm playing now, um, I did when I did the original guy that I was talking about, and I ran
mhm.
him up to 15th level.
Okay.
I had started a secondary character for those adventures, right? That the other guy was too tall for.
Hmm.
Uh, Gloria, you know, Holy Champion,
Okay.
Belisarda Holy Champion. So that was fun. So this cycle around, the other ones that have always interested me, but I could never really feel like I was get a handle on it back in the original cycle was the Keo.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
It
yeah.
was
All
like
right.
these
So
these are some very interesting people, and they like have an origin that's totally different from everybody else, right?
correct.
Come from, the no, and it's not quite clear to me where they initially came from. Like, did they come from outer space? Or they're flying
Hmm.
cities?
Hmm.
Did they come from another world? What? So they came out with the Children of the Sky source book, which gives
Okay.
you a lot more background. So that's actually what I'm have put together now and have played a few times is a Psy Warrior for
Okay.
the Keo. Oh, whoop, sorry about that.
All right.
Sorry, hit the wrong keyboard.
Yeah, whatever.
And so I'm using that codex. Um,
So I'll give you a little Keo insight. I happen to be well acquainted with the background. I know the author that put together that stuff. And if you really just want like an idea of what the majority of Keo behave like, what is their
mhm.
personality, look up Meyer Briggs, INTJ.
INTJ.
Yep.
Okay.
That's basically their mindset.
Okay. I will take a look at that because I was trying to decide, well, should they be like samurai? And
So
I was,
that
well,
so all
we'll
right, you
focus on the sword,
think
that's
of
the
them as Celtic samurai.
Celtic samurai. Okay. Yeah. Um, because again, like initially in the codex, they were interesting to me, but I didn't feel like I got enough to figure out
Hmm.
where were they coming from.
Yep.
So now after reading Children of the Sky, I'm like, okay, I can work with that. Um, so yeah, so I'm playing this one as kind of a person who has, for personal reasons, needed to leave Kafara, however you say it,
Hmm.
Kapara, their the
Far,
thing,
yeah.
And based on the current or recent events, they had a war with the Koreani, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's thought, that eventually there's a negotiated peace that nobody's happy with, from what I can tell. Um, so it makes sense to me that this person is like, okay, they have been sent out to learn what they can about the Koreani, right? Any intel is good intel. Who are the Koreani's opponents, right? So, the enemy of my enemy could
Mm-hmm.
possibly be my friend. So it's trying to come up with some explanation about, because obviously the new arc is set in the Blessed Lands
Mm-hmm.
mostly. So it's like trying to come up with some explanation about why this Kyo is knocking around the Blessed Lands. It's not religious unless because I didn't want to play one that had gone over to the Koreani, right? I already played a Koreani loyalist. I want to
Mm-hmm.
play somebody who's not. So he doesn't care about the religious stuff, obviously. So why would he be knocking around? Well, I decided he's trying to learn more about the Koreani, learn their weak points, learn, their pressure points,
Mm-hmm.
who can maneuver, to because inevitably there's going to be another war with the Koreani because they keep
Pushing
pushing.
and pushing and pushing
They're
because they can't help themselves.
aggressive, imperialistic. They keep pushing into the Western lands. I think they occupied the shadow towns. They were in Epion, and now they're in Epion and the shadow towns. So if you're a Keo, you're like, okay, we're going to have to fight these guys again
Right.
sooner or later. Whether they started or we started, we're going to want to push them out. So anything we can learn about them would be advantageous. But yeah, I'm enjoying the character development there, and they're interesting because they have such a unique take on so many things. Like I said, they don't worship any of the gods. They don't. They believe in the creator that died to create the universe, and so all this religious stuff to them is a bunch of like, yeah, they recognize the gods exist, but they don't see them as gods. They just see them as powerful beings, not worthy of worship. And so that's something that differentiates them from everybody else, you
Mm-hmm.
know, except
So I'm
that
also
maybe the
trying to
borders.
so you brought up 'cause I like to also pimp their books a little bit. So you brought up the Blessed Lands, that's where the campaign you're involved in right now is focused. They have a source book out there, a codex for the Blessed Lands to tell you a lot of details. Like most of the source books, there's just plot hook after plot hook after plot hook in their source books. I mean, it's just filled with fantastic information and ideas for any game master to go off in their own direction. So tell me about your experience with the Blessed Lands. What's going on there?
Well, I'm very early. I've only played four of
Okay.
the soft points from two. So at which point my local group kind of fell apart. So I'm trying to get some online play lined up, but
Hmm.
which I haven't done in many years. So I'm trying to get back up to speed. But to me, at least my impression or my character's impression of the Blessed Lands is this is a place where there's been way too much history in the sense that they talk about places in the world that have continually been fought over,
Hmm.
the natural invasion routes and things like that
Hmm.
in the real world. The Blessed Lands are like that to the nth degree, nth power, right? Everybody. Well, it's like the first city. It's like it's been everybody's capital. It was the snake people's capital. It was the capital of the elves. It was the capital of the Imperium of Man. And so it's just layer upon layer upon layer of history. Most of it terrible, right? So everywhere you look, there's been a massacre or a curse or something horrible has happened. Um, and naturally you also have these different forces that are confronting each other there, because you've got the Kitani from the northwest are there, the Koreani from the southeast are there. The elves are like hovering in the background up in the vastwood to the north. Then you got the locals who are just trying to live there, right? They were born and reared there. They don't care about all this other crap. They're trying to make a living. They would just want to be alive when it's
Mm-hmm.
all said and done.
It's common
You've
working
got the
folk.
Yeah, the common working folk, and then you've got the Tormal Khan,
Mm-hmm.
who's like the Ming here guy who by chance sort of ended up in charge. So he's there kind of, trying to ride herd on all these different factions and make sure that they don't kill each other or just and go having the Koreani and the Katani have already had two wars. After the second one, they kind of worked out this deal where they wouldn't, this is
They
your
they share the
share
first
this.
city.
Yeah, right.
They
They're both are going to
defend.
defend the city, and they're limited in how many troops they can have. It's like Berlin.
Yep.
Oh, maybe you could draw an analogy there, right? You have these two sides that they're not in hot war with each other, but they have been, and they could be in the future. And so they spend this time, kind of eyeballing each other. And then you've got the religious types that are there, right? You've got the
Mm-hmm.
Koreani church, you got the Milandir church, you got the Katani religious people. They're there. Then you've got the archaeology types. You've got the Azure Way versus the Emerald Society versus I can't remember the name of the ones from the Katani, but there's so you have these three different organizations that are in there. The last one I played was the elves show up, and this elf who's having visions, and he from the past lives, and he's trying to find something from the ancient days when it was still the snake people and the elves, and so he's back, and you get roped into trying to take him into the ruins, the uncleansed area or whatever to find it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just about like you say, there's about a bajillion plot hooks that you
Yep.
could go with, whichever direction you want to move in. Um, so it's very, very interesting in that regard. Um, yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, I'm enjoying what I've played. I'm
Great.
I'm very eager to play some more. I did play one of the introductory modules that's called In Plain Sight,
Okay.
set in Savona,
Mm-hmm.
and the kind of the patron that brings you in is this female Val Sheem senator. And I was absolutely convinced that she's the daughter of my player character that I had in the first cycle. It says her father
uh,
is dead, but I'm like,
mm,
I think she's his daughter. I think that's who her father was
cool.
my guy. Because he went back when, when it was
Very nice.
fake, he went back to Savona and tried to have a decent life and do his thing. And I bet that's his daughter that
Okay.
where it's that.
Well,
So anyway, it's a lot of fun. I'm definitely enjoying the
excellent.
site.
What I
Wes,
want to point out is that, if you're looking, and I'll let the listeners know as well. So Arcanus does have a Discord channel. The Discord channel organizes online play both for fifth edition and for the ARG, the Arcanus role-playing game. I just signed up for the last of this short series of intro adventures, and then they're going to start pushing into, I'm not really sure what story arc, but I'm just jumping on to get my feet wet again, and so I can make a character and think
well,
about
that's
character
kind of what I'm
generation.
doing. I'm waiting for them to catch up to where I am
Okay.
so that I
Okay.
can jump back in.
All right.
Get into I think I need number 5 for season 2. So
Gotcha.
once they get through the introductory adventure, and then I'm planning on jumping back in.
Excellent.
Because I have enjoyed them. It's just
Mhm.
like I said, gamers are
Well,
thin on the ground in Alaska. What can I say? It's
yeah.
not like,
So
you know,
what are the odds that you headed out for one of the big cons sometime soon?
not this year for sure.
Mhm.
The problem I have is that during the summers, well, the problem I've had in the past, of course, is I was working
Right.
all in spring and everything. But during the summers, June to September, my wife and I run a farmer's market every
Well, there you
Saturday, which kind of puts a crimp into going anywhere to, go to Origins or any of those Winter Fantasy now.
Oh, well, Gary
Uh,
Kahn.
yeah, Gary Con.
And there's
Uh,
another one that is either concurrent or the week before that's another supposed to be a
right,
really fun, medium-sized con.
right. So I would say the odds are zero until the fall at
Okay.
the earliest. But yeah, I would like to get back to one of the big cons. I used to that was well before when I was playing, I lived in Nashville. Uh,
Okay.
I was stationed at the RTC unit at Vanderbilt. So that was a great location.
Yeah. Yep.
Nice and
I lived in
central.
Lexington, Kentucky. It
Yeah,
was awesome
yeah.
for everything from Atlanta, Chicago, Detroit,
Fort
Pittsburgh, St. Louis.
Wayne, for Winter
Yep.
Fantasy or
Yep.
Columbus or whatever, it was very nicely centrally located.
I
Uh,
agree.
Alaska, not so much.
Not so much. Well,
But again, like I said, once I have a little more time, I might look at some of the winter ones. Uh,
hmm
it's just that as long as we keep running this market, um,
Hey,
it's
I
pretty.
look, man, like I said, I'm a chef by profession. Food is that common connection for everybody, and fresh, farm grown, the person who grew it, and that's like the best food in the world.
And it's particularly important here in Alaska because we import
hmm
95% of our food.
Yeah.
And we, from a resiliency standpoint, because man, we have things like earthquakes and stuff up here.
hmm
So we need more locally grown,
Hmm.
local food sources um, that would be available, if we had an airport or an earthquake and the port was closed and things like that.
Yeah.
Back in '64, when we had the huge earthquake, we were growing like 50% of our food at that point.
hmm
Now, like I said, it's like 5%. So
Wow.
this is our little piece of what we're trying to do
Okay.
to help out, to give our local farmers a
Yeah.
market to sell, and our local people
Well,
a
it's
place to
fabulous. I mean,
sell.
as a chef, look, I've got connections with the Culinary Institute of America, my alma mater. Besides being a certified executive chef, a certified cannabis chef, certified sommelier, I'm also a certified, um, oh shit, I stumble on the word. Um, I have a certification in how to set up your growing so that you are maximizing the potential for both food production and turning around and leaving the healthiest earth behind that you can.
Right, right. Sustainable,
Yeah,
sustainable agriculture. Yep.
permaculture. That's what I have, a permaculture design. Jesus.
Yep.
So I also have a permaculture design. So, this is like, outside of gaming, this is other one of my big hot topics. So, well, look, man, we've been talking for about an hour here. That's been a pleasure meeting you, a
I've enjoyed it
fellow
myself.
vet. Um, I look forward to future conversations, and hopefully we'll be seeing each other on some online play, and we'll get you out here for some sort of winter Arcanis con or something like that.
That sounds like a wonderful idea. So
All right.
thanks for having me on. I do appreciate it. It's good to
Thanks.
even I went and dug my old guy out. I was gonna
Yeah.
PG. I got all my
All the old
files and
certs.
files of certs and everything.
Do
So
they still do? Is it still paper
still do
certs?
certs, still paper
Oh my
certs.
God. I had a special cert cutter and everything.
Yep.
Oh
Got a
man.
cert cutter and the plastic things to slide them in.
All
Those.
right. Well,
All right.
fabulous. Take care.
You too. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.
Bye.